We are live. Good morning. I'm Antoinette Mosley, the chair of the Housing and Community Development Committee, and I'd like to welcome you to the May 20, 2025 remote meeting. All council members and staff are participating virtually. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone by calling 855-925-2801 and using meeting code 9791. Again, for those of you out there with us today, welcome. For today's meeting, we will have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801, meeting code 9791. Your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. At this point, speakers will need to push *3 to enter the speaker queue. And now I'll go through and introduce all the committee members and staff who are participating virtually. Council and staff, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. Councilwoman Sage Turner.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Shanika Smith.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Good morning.
Senior Assistant City Attorney Janice Ashley.
Good morning.
Community Economic Development Director Nikki Reed.
Good morning.
And Affordable Housing Officer Sasha Vertinsky.
Good morning.
And now we'll move to our agenda. The first item up is the approval of the September 17, 2024 minute meetings. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve our pre-Helene meetings. Minutes.
Because we're virtual, I'll now do a roll call vote. Councilmember Shanika Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Sage Turner.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Next item up on our agenda is the HCD Committee Scope and Overview. Nikki Reed, Community and Economic Development Director, and Ben Woody, the Assistant City Manager, will present. I'll hand it over to you, Nikki.
Great, thank you so much. So welcome back. It's been a while. It's good to be here. Today, this morning, we'd like to start with doing an FY26 HCD overview and work planning goals. So Katie, if you'll advance to the next slide, we'll get started. So just some key takeaways, just really in terms of framing our discussion today. We'll start with the 4 priority recovery areas, and they serve as our foundation for developing work plans and also for allocating resources that will aid in our recovery. And then in response to those priority recovery areas, Council has reestablished 4 council committees that will play a central role in shaping policy and guiding advisory board contributions as we move forward. So the council committee scopes and work plans are informed by City Council's annual recovery priorities and goals. And then those committee work plans include a combination of ongoing administrative items along with other policy considerations that will include specific assignments for advisory boards and other committees. So we're going to take time now to kind of walk through and unpack this workflow as you see here, from our priority recovery areas to the council committees, scopes, work plans, and then how that flows into advisory boards. So next slide, Katie. So FY26 recovery priorities and goals. So council did affirm these 4 priority recovery areas and then outlined how the city should approach each of these priority areas moving forward. And they really do serve as that foundation for then staff to develop work plans and then to have the conversations with council about allocating those resources. And you'll see we have people, economy, infrastructure and environment, and housing. We're going to go through each one, but of course, this committee is going to take some extra time to really zero in on the recovery priorities as it pertains to housing. Next slide, Katie. So people, so this should be a reflection of the conversations that council has had around shaping the recovery priority for people. So really supporting residents through communication, neighborhood level preparedness efforts, really also recognizing that pre-existing vulnerabilities are amplified in disaster and how we need to work to address these disparities, really centered around a people-focused recovery. Next slide, Katie. Second goal is economy. Of course, that was one of the big challenges after the disaster was the impacts that we had to our economy. So council really wanted to focus on ensuring that businesses who were impacted have access to resources needed to recover and rebuild, but that we also really continue to focus on supporting underrepresented businesses, expanding the city's contractor pool so that we're able to carry out the important work of recovery, and then also really being mindful of the value of a diversified and sustainable economic base. Next slide, Katie. Infrastructure and environment, another priority for recovery, really to focus on long-term resilience and how our approach to rebuilding infrastructure can meet that. Very much focused on improving our water system resilience, flood management, stormwater, strengthen our ability to respond to climate-related disasters, and really prioritizing environmental sustainability. So that really encompasses our goal around infrastructure and environment. Next slide. And then here is, again, one of the major touch points and focus areas that HCD will hone in on is that recovery priority around housing. So I'm going to spend a little more time here to go over these, and really we're going to take other slides to really unpack how we're going to approach these particular goals. So the first one, to help residents navigate post-disaster housing challenges by connecting them to available resources and funding, proactively address future displacement events, support temporary and permanent housing solutions for displaced residents, leverage policy tools and partnerships where possible to expand housing options in the city, and then advance housing stability efforts such as home repair programs and regulatory flexibility to increase supply. So again, a lot of our focus is around housing, and these bullet points really help us to hone in our approach. Next slide, Katie. I think just a transition now as we look at those priorities, hopefully that is some helpful framing to then look at those particular goals for HCD. Next slide. So with our council committees, we wanted to ensure that the work of council, the advisory boards, and staff are all aligned around those goals. So the 4 committees that were established include the Policy, Finance, and Infrastructure Committee, Housing and Community Development, Planning, Economic Development and Environment, and then Public Safety. Next slide, Katie. HCD. So here we're going to really now think about the draft scope of work for the HCD committee. What you see in italics is really the overall draft scope, and then those bullets really seek to unpack that a little bit further, those key statements from that draft scope in terms of how that really begins to play out in some of the decision making of HCD. So I'll read that aloud. So the Housing Community Development Committee provides policy recommendations to council on the creation and maintenance of affordable housing, the review of policy matters relating to the provision of services for unhoused individuals, implementation of HUD community development activities, and post-disaster housing stability efforts. So again, really taking those goal statements from the recovery priorities and then really shoring up that draft of the scope. So the first we'll unpack is the creation and maintenance of housing. So this body would make recommendations that would include city investments through public housing or affordable private housing developments. The second bullet, the policy matters relating to services to unhoused, that really comes through the Asheville-Buncombe continuum of care. Next slide, Katie, we'll continue with these bullets. To oversee the city's investments in the Department of Housing and Urban Development programs, that implements a wide range of community development activities, including vibrant neighborhoods, improving and expanding affordable housing and combating homelessness. And I do want to take a second. When we had initially drafted these slides, we had zeroed in on a couple of other example activities that fall within this goal. We have modified this really just to broaden that scope just a little bit instead of drilling down too deep, just to really kind of make sure that that was broad enough to capture the wide range. So we have now concluded that by saying, and the funding of other eligible activities to support community development. So really trying to capture the full breadth of that. And then the last bullet, housing stability efforts. So to advance that by supporting temporary and permanent housing solutions for displaced residents and helping residents navigate post-disaster housing challenges by connecting them to resources and funding. So again, hopefully those linkages are starting to really show through, where we have recovery goals, HCD's draft scope, really zeroing in on that housing focus. Our chair is the Vice Mayor, Antoinette Mosley, members Shanika Smith and Sage Turner, and of course staff has been Woody, Katie Noun, and Janice Ashley. And our schedule there is the third Tuesday of the month at 10 a.m. as needed. So I think our next slide is really just a quick touch base with the committee members, just to see if there's any questions, or if that is something, if that is something that is acknowledged by the committee as being a good scope.
It sounds good to me. Council, do you have any questions for Nikki?
No questions.
The only thing that comes to mind, and it's not really relevant because of our other council committees are not up, or community committees, is that when we have that role of working with other committees to align policies and stuff, it was kind of Deborah's walkthrough of the test run of boards and commissions process when we were working with HACA and AHAC directly. Remember, some of that might need to be in there in the future, but other than that, it sounds great.
If I can add, Council, that's a great point, Councilman Turner, and we will, I think, at our, this, and Nikki will show a timeline slide here shortly. So I believe that by your next HCD committee meeting, and really all the next committee meetings, I think we'll be in a position to start to make those linkages to organizational work plan projects and to advisory boards. So this is just kind of the overview, but Councilman Turner, I think we're going to land where you're talking about it at our next meeting, and that'll get us really kicked off into the next fiscal year, hopefully organized and efficient on the things we want to accomplish.
Just one more thing. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go right ahead, Sage.
Just one other thing, the county had reached out looking for folks to join their affordable housing committee. They opened up 2 community seats, which is interesting. Anyways, I may take one. I am talking with them about it, and it may help. I was just thinking about as we talk about scope, working with the county. So go ahead.
Then my question, and it's actually related to the boards. Remind me when the chairs and vice chairs of the advisory committees will be meeting?
It'll be the week of June 16th. So I believe that's the 3rd week in June. So that'll be about a week and a half after the big policy, finance, infrastructure meeting that you will have on June 10th.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Nikki?
Okay, so
Oh.
we have just a few more slides, and that timeline slide actually is really going to help to round out our discussion. So next slide, Katie. So quick overview of guidelines. So just in terms of agenda creation and really what's going to inform this committee's work plan, we'll kind of start with agenda items. So 2 members of a committee can add or approve agenda items. Also, the mayor or city manager can request that an item be added to a committee agenda. And committees will be provided a recommended work plan based on the council's priorities and organizational work plan items. And so again, just to uplift what we were saying earlier about how all these things work together on a timeline. So that organizational work plan, that is going to be discussed at the PFI committee level, and there is some workshopping there with boards and commissions. And then this committee will see their proposed or the work plan be finalized at your next meeting. So really centering on that organizational work plan will help us inform the work that this committee does. And that last bullet also is that once the committee really has an established work plan, then that will flow directly into assignments for the boards and commissions to assist in that. I think the next slide, if you'll advance, Katie, really starts to then show, I'll pause for a second. Go ahead.
Just procedurally, can't the chair also add items to the agenda on their own?
That's a good question, Councilman Turner. Our kind of understanding historically is that the chair has worked with one of the other committee members to agenda an item. So I haven't worked with HCD before, so again, I'm a little bit limited to some of my work with more PED, but well, I guess I'll ask the question back to Councilmember. What is your understanding of how we agenda items for the council committee? Or what's been your practice?
I think chairs were able to add, and that was the case on other boards too, but I'm not sure it ever happened too often. There were often, things bubbling up and more than one person involved. So I was just asking procedurally. I do think you can, but.
Generally you can, but if you have adopted this kind of policy, then you to encourage more collaboration between members, that's really what you would go with. I forget, do the subcommittees have rules of procedure?
They do not. Okay. So that's why we
kind of it.
Yeah, we've kind of framed this just as guidelines. And I think that's correct, Janice, that typically, if there is some consensus or building consensus among council members, I think that's a good sign towards moving something forward. But again, we're here to take comments from y'all on this as well. Sorry, Chair.
No, sorry. So Janice, let's go down this procedural rabbit hole. So I suspect that technically the chair isn't supposed to be the only one bringing forward something, because you do leave the door open then to a 2-1 vote, potentially, right? And then what does that mean if the board votes it down? Then whatever that issue was doesn't necessarily even go to the full body, right? Because for anything to get on the full council agenda, it's the mayor, city manager, or 3 council members, right?
Right. So that's probably where the suggestion is coming from, whereas more generally, like the Planning and Zoning Commission, the chair could just say, I want to add this to the agenda, and has, not often, but doesn't need to confer with other members. But this is a council committee. So again, if that's just a suggestion, if you don't agree, or you think that the chair should be able to just add agenda items without another committee member, or.
Well, sure, I'm the chair, so yeah.
Yeah.
But as a practical, I don't think you're supposed to be able to do that.
I just bring it up because I know that we had in the past, and it does seem like if this is what we're saying going forward, we'll just follow this procedure. But
I think Janice, you're right. It's council's committees. The mayor appoints and forms these. So I think from staff's perspective, the main thing we want to do is just be consistent across the committees. So if this doesn't feel right to HCD, then we can flag that and discuss it maybe with full council at some point. But if this works, then this is the slide we plan to show later today for PED, and then next week for public safety. So maybe we can go to all the council committees and kind of see what the feeling is around it. So I'll end that. What do you think, Chairman?
Well, I think either way, because it doesn't say 2 members of the committee shall add or approve. So really, it's really saying nothing to me in my legal mind, because they can add agenda items, and it doesn't say that the chair can't.
But they need to, as I read this, the chair would have to have another member say, okay, we can add that. See, the second bullet is mayor alone or city manager alone can request that an item be added to a committee agenda. So you could either have the chair can add, or 2 members of the committee can add, or again.
I've never had the mayor request an agenda item on a city committee.
Love.
Right, right.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if that's happened
The
with the
point of the
mayor.
language, maybe the first one just needs a little tweaking that, it will require 2 members of the committee. Either way, see what the other committees think. I'm not worried about it.
I'm not concerned about it either, actually.
Yeah,
Because usually I think the way it goes, things bubble up
exactly.
and we move forward as things bubble up.
Yeah.
And then we have broader work plans and that get woven into what we're trying to do anyway. So we just
guess, yeah.
So Nikki, go ahead.
Great, good discussion. So thank you for that feedback. If you'll move to the next slide, Katie, then we'll kind of review some example work plan topics that would come to this committee. And I've organized it here really by those goal areas. So when we think about the creation and maintenance of housing as a goal area, our allocation plan for the bond, as we do city-owned property development for affordable housing, housing trust fund, so those kinds of topics would come before HCD prior to going to council for a vote. Regarding services to unhoused individuals, there's a lot of work that's being done within the COC, and so having this be a touch point for the COC, especially as it relates to any kind of funding decisions that may come down or be necessary, otherwise hearing that flow of information from the COC. This group is absolutely aware of how we annually each year make decisions around the CDBG funding allocations. So that's referenced here. We also made reference to the CDBG DR housing program. So already starting to think through how DR programs would then come through committee. So the housing program makes sense to really have in HCD. And then within the scope of housing stability efforts, we've planned to do some reporting on our monitoring. So really to kind of circle back to the committee on funding allocations that have been made prior to, and really report on the outcomes of those investments and how the overall housing trust fund is performing, how rent monitoring and things like that can be shared with this committee. And then also just under the umbrella of the implementation of affordable housing plan, looking at something like a home repair, anti-displacement policy, really having this group be the body to review that. And then here's the touch point to AHAC, the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee is having that annual reporting from AHAC to come through this committee. So this is really an example. Of course, all of this will be finalized and come back to you at your next meeting. I think our next slide is the timeline. So if you'll move to that one, Katie, then we can see how this all functions together. So yes, so we're really, we're starting with this organizational work plan. So right now, we're in the midst of doing our internal review on our departmental work plans. For example, the annual action plan for CDBG is definitely within the scope of our department, and then also reviewing proposed projects. June 2nd, so our management team will review and finalize the FY26 organizational work plan. Our management team is our city manager's office and all department directors from across the city organization. So that review is a really robust conversation around what our organization hopes to accomplish in alignment with council's recovery goals. Then on June 10th, the PFI committee will have a work session with Fountain Works, where there'll be a proposed work plan for each of the council priorities. So that's really where we're going to start seeing the organizational work plan be presented to the PFI council committee. That workshop, as we mentioned earlier, with the boards and commission chairs, then occurs after that, the week of June 16th, and that tees us up perfectly for June 17th, coming to HCD at your next regular meeting to really finalize the FY26 work plan for the committee. Then after that, that will be our timing to really position the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee to align with the council committee work plans and really understand what scope of work will be on their list to help support this committee. Any questions on that? Go ahead.
Just some suggestions for as y'all develop the work plan. I know I got a call from some county commissioners about the transit center lot. I can't remember what we call it, Talbert. And they're taking some action on that. And it makes me just think we ought to maybe try and sync up with where they're at. So maybe in that vein, an update around what else is happening in our urban kind of environment or with outside partners. I know like where I'd love an update on 319 Biltmore. Can we just get some things into the work plan around like what's still out there, what's the status, and how we're going to interact with the county? I know like Bowen data is coming to the home consortium. That could be something we want on there. And then one thing that we missed out on before was when the county took on the DFI group. And I think they're doing another contract with them for something. And I wonder if we should be talking with them about, overlap or something. Anyways, just ideas. It's y'all's work plan to bring us, but things that might show up on it.
So, Councilman Turner, a couple of things, and maybe, this is where it's, so the organizational work plan, they're the big projects, as an example, and Nikki showed examples of things, but, just bigger is like the French Broad Riverfront rebuild. That's a huge project that spans multiple departments. That's the kind of thing that will go to policy finance. Clearly, that's going to be an organizational work plan item, right? That's going to be something I think that is of extreme interest to the community. But a notch lower than that is there are projects and items that rest on department work plans. So 319 Biltmore is a really good example. That is something that probably won't be on the organizational work plan item because I don't think it's of that scale, but it's a big item or an important item on CED's work plan. Matter of fact, we plan to come to y'all in the next month or two. So there'll be more department-based projects that'll come through committees. So the committee's work plan is going to be a mix of things. There'll be organizational work plan items. There's big ticket items that'll work through the committees to keep you in the loop, but also there'll be smaller things that are really more department focused. Those too will come to HCD. So I think to characterize that is you'll have a mix on this committee over the next year of smaller things, like you said, that are really related to CED, but you'll also continue to have, the bigger things like how are we going to spend the bond money for housing? So you're going to be a busy committee for the next fiscal year.
Yeah, that's great. That's helpful. How we classify them. I just don't want us to not have any awareness of everything else that's happening.
Right, and really the organizational work plan, that's going to focus on those 4 buckets, those big kind of recovery things that you told us to be mindful of. But that doesn't replace the steady state kind of the things that Nikki's department does month in and month out, which we're going to do one of those in a minute. Nikki, do you want to add anything to that, or does that feel okay to you?
That's great.
Okay, Nikki, next slide.
Last slide, I think, is our key takeaways again. So yes, just really organizing and being very intentional around our priority recovery areas, how our 4 council committees play a role in shaping policy around those, really then refining that scope and work plan to tie back to those recovery priorities. And then once the council committees scopes are defined, with, again, as Ben said, both our departmental, administrative, ongoing items, as well as key items from the organizational work plan, then really looking at engaging and defining that for our advisory boards that are within the scope of this committee. So that is our presentation. I appreciate the conversation. So any final questions?
I believe unless council has any other questions, I believe we asked all the questions we had. And if so, we're ready to move forward with the next item on our agenda, which is the interim funding of existing products. And Sasha Vertinsky will lead us in that discussion. Sasha.
Thanks so much, Chair. Yes, Sasha Vertinsky here, Affordable Housing Division. I also on the call is Jonathan Nussberg, who is with Commonwealth Development Corporation. If at the end of this, if you have questions for him, he's here and available. Next slide. So Fairhaven Summit is a name you've probably heard several times. This project was funded initially in the FY24 Housing Trust Fund cycle for $500,000. And then some additional funding was approved in December of 23 for $375,000. So we actually closed on that loan last year of $875,000. This project is 100% affordable, has 77 units with a mix of incomes, and averages 60% and below. They are requesting an additional $607,000 for the project due to costs that have come in during construction. The project is under construction and nearing completion. The gap was created by several factors, including a 2-month delay because of the storm and additional design changes required by NCHFA. Staff is recommending approval for this, and this item is on the council agenda for next Tuesday. Next. I won't re-say anything I've already said, but this is the site and overview aerial. It is just off Sweeten Creek Road in South Asheville. Council also approved a Luigi grant in December of 23 as well. So the total HTF financing would be $1.482 million for this project. The loan terms would be the same as the other loan terms for this project, 20-year maturity, payments deferred, but 2% interest is compounding annually. Next, Katie. This is just a breakdown of bedrooms and income. The project does have 20 project-based vouchers already committed to it. They also are involved in the KEY program, which serves low-income residents with disabilities. And there's a number of 3-bedroom units in this project as well. Quite a large number. Next. So this is their their capital stack. We would have slightly more money in this project than Buncombe County if this is approved. Next. So looking at the total HTF funding, if this is approved at $1.482 million, that subsidy would be $19,247 per unit. And then that would be 6.1% of the total development cost, which is under our policy limit of 10%. If you add in the Luigi grant, the total city support would be just over 10%. So we're right at that policy limit. So staff feels comfortable with the request. This is actually similar to requests for similar size projects that have been approved. There was another project, 70 units, that was approved for $1.8 million the same year this was initially approved. So this is still coming under similar projects.
Sasha, remind me, our cap was what, 10%?
Yes.
Okay.
And so this funding would ensure that this project could get across the finish line. Been out to the site. They're doing lots of work, and we got great recent pictures of, we've got actual structures 2 and 3 stories on the site. And it aligns with our consolidated plan, prioritizing rental housing affordable to those at 60% AMI and below. Next, and staff doesn't have any concerns. Currently, there's $2.1 million available in the Housing Trust Fund. That's more than we thought there was. Part of that came from the money that came back to the Housing Trust Fund back in October of 24, if you remember. This approval of this request would reduce that balance by $607,000, and there'd be $1.5 million. Another word just about that balance, there is almost $500,000 of that balance came from hotel public benefit dollars. So next. So we're recommending approval based on, these points, 77 new units with a range of incomes and a range of bedroom mix, the voucher units, the KEY program, and that the request will still work with our policy limits. And next. believe that's it. And we may be back. So we have a suggested motion. And then the next slide is the key takeaways again. So, and then again, Jonathan is here if you have any questions for the developer.
Council, do you have any questions for the developer?
I just have one for staff.
Sure.
I'm just trying to like recompose my brain around this stuff after it's been so long. So the 20-year term starts at CO, is that right?
I think, well, we already have a loan going, and this would be a separate loan.
So it has two different starts and end dates.
Slightly.
I guess I just always wonder, so then all the payments are deferred for 20 years. And the hope is at some point they'll refinance or balloon or something, pay us off. Okay. Just kind of
Yeah,
my brain wrapped around it again.
right.
And Councilwoman Smith, do you have any questions? I'll go ahead and say that I'm particularly pleased to support a development that's 100% affordable. This is really great for me. And if there aren't any more questions, I'll open the floor for, oh, do you have another question, Sage?
Is this seniors? Is it 55 plus? I'm trying to remember. It's not.
No,
Okay.
it's families.
Okay. So there's 3 bedrooms, all that stuff, just putting it together. Okay. I'm
Yeah.
happy to. And I'll move to recommend the Asheville City Council approve Commonwealth Development's request for an additional $607,000 for a second housing trust fund loan to construct 77 new affordable apartments.
I'll second.
Okay, now we'll do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Turner,
Aye.
Councilwoman Smith,
Aye.
myself, aye. It passes unanimously. Thank you so much, Sasha. Thank you. Moving on to in the agenda, up next is public comment. Katie, do we have any callers?
Let me check just one moment. We do not.
Okay, thank you very much. Great meeting, everyone. If there's nothing else, we'll adjourn the meeting. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.